Hi, my name's Ashley,
And I'm Matt.
and this is The Room for Creativity, a podcast where we explore different intersections of tech and creativity.
Last week, we looked at what we mean by creativity. And this week, we're going to take a look at how we define technology.
That we are. But before we jump into that, I do want to first give a quick shout out. This is from There's a Sign for That. They are a great local, Ontario company that does wonderful mugs and a bunch of other things as well. If you're looking for a gift in the near future and you want to support a small business, I would totally recommend them.
Yeah, love to support small businesses.
Absolutely. Now, what I'd love to talk about today is we were actually just talking about this before we started. You were telling me a little bit about the music that you're writing right now, and of course it led us down a rabbit hole. So do you want to start us off there?
Sure, I am working on a brand new piece of music that's going to be premiered by a local orchestra here in Kitchener next April. And I am still in the sketching process. And as I was going on and writing things, I had something, but I wasn't very happy with it. It wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. It wasn't hitting some marks. So I stopped, I took a step back, and I realized that I was worried too much about what the audience was going to think of it. And so I scrapped a bunch of stuff, started again, and I started writing the music that I wanted to, and all of a sudden it's become fun again.
Wonderful.
It wasn't fun for a bit. It felt like a slog, and it's become fun again, which it should be.
Yes, absolutely. We've all gotten into something and gone, this isn't where I want to be. Now, this did lead us down a rabbit hole, like many of our conversations. And that rabbit hole had to do with that balance between creating something for your audience and whether or not you're making something for yourself. So, oddly enough, led us to modernism and postmodernism. So turn of the 20th. Yeah, I know.
Postmodernism.
Turn of the 20th or turn of the 19th to the 20th century and mid 20th century on to about the 90s, I would say, is postmodern.
Yeah, sure. That works for me. I'm
But
not sure exactly what the exact.
I can't remember the exact dates, but what we were talking about is it really doesn't matter about that so much as the type of things that were being made. I used T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land because English is always my space, and talked about how it is written as an English poem, English literature. That's what I studied. 7 languages.
7 languages?
7 languages. English, French, German, Latin, and I can't remember what other ones.
3 other mystery languages.
Yeah, 3 other magic languages. But it is considered one of the harder poems to read and study.
Well, yeah, someone like me would be able to read a little over a 7th of it, because I can't speak any of those languages, other than English and a little bit of French.
Yeah, you'd pick up little bits and bobs, but really it's made for people who are sitting and have an advanced degree or 2 or 3 and going,
Yes, I see what you did there. That seems very mean towards an audience to say, you know what, you can't engage with this unless you learn these languages.
But I think about music. I think back to, say, the 1900s and the Romantics, where they really started getting into what's called program music. That's where they write a piece and it has a story that goes along with it, essentially. My favorite is Hector Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique, if you have not heard it. Longer piece, but oh my gosh, it's so cool, especially the Walk to the Scaffold and the Witch's Sabbath. Before I go down too much of a rabbit hole on that, but it's a story about a man who had a love and loss and all of the things that come with it, and you follow the story, and it is beautiful music that takes you along on this ride. It is accessible to someone who has not studied music.
You're missing the fun part of that story, though.
Oh.
Where he does all the drugs and then has a vision of his love as a witch walking to a scaffold.
Yes,
That's the fun part of the story.
Yes, and you can actually go listen to it and then watch something that talks about specifically the Walk to the Scaffold. It is such a very interesting thing, especially once you have that context.
Anyway, there's been enough musicians in history that feel like they've been having fights with their audience too.
That's true, but thinking of the 19th century stuff that's come out, or 20th century stuff that's come out, there are a lot of things that were made, just like my thing about T.S. Eliot. where it was not made for an audience of me. It was made for an audience of you, and it wasn't made for enjoyment. It was made for analysis. It was made to be fascinating, not enjoyable.
I mean, I think there's places for those kind of things.
There is.
I would imagine that most art is made for someone to engage with, not for it to be, torn apart as an intellectual exercise behind closed doors.
But, and I and other people have talked about this too. These are not the pieces that get played anymore because they're not something that a regular audience can access.
No, and I think a lot of musicians especially forgot about the part where the audience is part of the process. Like, you need an audience. If you don't have people, if people don't want to come and see what you've written, so you have no audience, then I was going to say, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. I mean, there is some merit to writing for yourself, but you need an audience. You need it. So if you're going to alienate them, then don't complain. If you're going to write the kind of music that no one wants to listen to, don't complain when no one shows up to your shows.
Yeah, and a combination of making things inaccessible, not really having as much access to the music itself, not just the inaccessible stuff that's being written today, and the fact that the rise of the popular music that we have and the different technologies, funnily enough, that now this wasn't the primary form of entertainment for the middle class. It changes things a lot in how we address it, what we do as the artist inside that space, and really the repercussions of those things.
But it's a hard road to walk.
Oh my gosh,
because
yes.
I started this talking about how I was worried too much about what the audience was expecting, and now we're saying, well, too bad for the audience. So I haven't figured this out. If I ever do, I will let you know.
Yeah,
that's being an artist.
I don't think we're saying too bad for the audience. I think we're saying we have to understand that the audience is part of the process, but at the same time, there is a merit and an understanding that we need. A merit and an understanding we need to include them in this process while still being true to ourselves. Not everyone's going to make something perfect for everyone. People will say, oh, The Wasteland is my favorite, or Mrs. Dalloway, which is a Virginia Woolf, and it's very challenging to read. Or then they'll say Philip Larkin's This Be the Verse,
anyway,
which starts with, they f you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do.
That sounds fun. He sounds like a card.
Mid to later 20th century. Look him up. I will put it in the references. But that's an absolute...
It's a hard thing to be on the edge of.
As we mentioned, rabbit holes.
Yeah.
One day we will do a full episode on just talking like this and kind of giving you some insight into how we go about these things. But for now, anyway, I think we need to get into technology.
What do we mean when we say technology?
Well, first and foremost, it's really important to remember that technology is always changing, simply because nothing has ever been as advanced in history as it is today. And that doesn't matter if you're listening to it when it came out or, 3 weeks, a year, 5 years down the road, because everything moves at the speed of today. So nothing will ever be more advanced for you than it is at this very point in this very moment in history.
Kind of makes you feel proud, doesn't it?
Yeah. But so obviously technology is a huge thing. We are focused on the disruptors. So the people, or not the people, the technologies that change how people do business, their ability to replace or massively alter industries and how they change our daily lives. So one of the first ones we can really talk about here, go into your spaces, photography.
Ooh, photography. Photography showed up in the mid-1830s, and people were mad about it.
Yes.
Suddenly, you didn't have to go to a professional oil painter and commission something and have it take who knows how long and be super expensive. You could just use your brand new fancy camera and go and take it yourself. So a whole industry was very angry about the fact that photography had showed up.
Yeah. And there were even changes that happened inside photography as it emerged and started to expand. We will be talking about that next week, and I am so excited about it. I remember this thing from QI, which is a show that we watch. It's from BBC. You can find a lot of it on even just YouTube. But the first picture of a recognizable human was done in France in 1838, and I can't remember who it was by.
Louis Daguerre.
Hey, I should have known that.
Yeah, you should have, but you didn't.
Yeah, Daguerreotype.
Louis Daguerre.
So that brought people forward, and all of a sudden this was this huge leap in technology. You went from needing to sit for weeks, or it taking a long time for you to get this back, to minutes.
Yep, it democratized who could create art.
Mm-hmm.
You no longer had to go to a specialized craftsperson. You could just do it at home.
Yeah. Another person who really fought something that honestly we don't even think of as a technology, is writing things down, writing our history. And that would have been Socrates.
Somebody got mad that writing was invented?
Not that it was invented, but the technologies that were used to create a permanent record of certain things to teach others.
And that was a bad thing.
According to Socrates, he preferred the oral tradition. Now that's AURAL. Basically, the discourse, the discussion between two people. And he said that's a better way to learn, because then you have to ask questions. You have to it's easier to put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're learning about. There's more empathy to what you learn, and you gain a greater depth of knowledge. He said that you gain a shallower depth of knowledge when things are written down. And, they're using papyrus. They're using, I don't know exactly what they were using to write what kind of uniform. Well, that's before that. But what kind of paper they're using, we're talking gut, we're talking, this is very expensive stuff. This is a technology in of itself to create this. But essentially, what we ended up with was this gentleman who was one of the leading philosophers of his time, saying the way that you want to learn through this technology, using this technology to record things, is going to lessen the knowledge of people as a whole.
It's pretty incredible to think that, this was the thought of it, and then to see where we've gone. But it also shows you that this is not a new phenomenon. I mean, there's lots of, kick-ups happening around AI and things like that. But I mean, this isn't an isolated era in human evolution.
Mm-hmm.
This has been going on for, thousands of years.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting.
And honestly, the reason we know that this was something that Socrates was kind of against, and the issues around it, is because Plato wrote it down in the Phaedrus dialogue.
But
another thing to think about is the assembly line. So we're talking Henry Ford. Assembly line started in 1913. His workers were not happy.
I was just listening to the score for the musical Ragtime recently, and there's a big section in the middle with Henry Ford and singing the praises of the assembly line. That reminds me of that.
Really great show if you've never seen it. There's, of course, the movie as well. I would suggest it.
Anyway, sorry.
No, great. But his workers were really, really angry and very distrustful of the assembly line when it came out. They were worried that it was going to put a lot of skilled tradespeople out of work. And in all honesty, it ended up creating more jobs, like tens of thousands more jobs. It sped up manufacturing. This is what brought availability of the car to the masses, of course, the Model T. And he even created these little towns where his workers could work or live. They weren't perfect. There were challenges, but this was something that was huge. And he raised the minimum wage for his workers, in part so that they could go and buy Model Ts. Again, it
sort of reminds me of the Luddites back in England.
Yeah?
Who were a group of people who were creating riots over things like looms and cotton gins.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is the issue, is that people nowadays like to throw it around as though the Luddites were just, anti-anything. They wanted to go back and live this, we're plowing by hand, idyllic rural lifestyle. But they were opposed specifically to new technologies that were going to take away the jobs that were there. They weren't anti-everything. They were just, we don't want to lose our jobs because these new things are coming in. So it just reminded me of that.
Yeah. But, I mean, we look at this and we were that's a really good point. But we look at these things, especially, one of the biggest modern inventions was arguably the assembly line, because think of everything that's in your house and think of how much of it is mass produced.
All probably made an assembly line.
Most likely.
So there.
So, yeah.
What else? Well, hey,
we
live in Kitchener and in Waterloo region, so we have a big one here.
That we do. I would call that BlackBerry.
BlackBerry. Remember BlackBerry?
I had a BlackBerry when I was younger, and oh my gosh, do I miss it. I loved that thing. The physical keyboard, oh my gosh.
I never had one. I never got into it. I know a lot of people did, but I never had a BlackBerry.
Oh, you missed out because
So I hear.
those QWERTY keyboards, they were a revolution. When the first one came out, it actually came out on their pager in the BlackBerry 850 in late 90s. So but everybody just went nuts over this keyboard. Immediately when they started making their phones, that got integrated into it, and they started when they started making those phones, by about the mid 2000s, they had half of the worldwide cell phone market.
That's pretty impressive.
It's wild to think. And the next person who did that was the one that was the disruptor.
Weren't we talking to somebody recently and something was said about like a new thing coming out where you could sort of fake a QWERTY keyboard on a cell phone? Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, actually, there's two. And
okay.
It's a company called Clicks. They're ex-BlackBerry people. So a lot of Canadian ties in with this. They have one they have made phone keyboards in the past that attach. They have a new one that is called the Clicks keyboard. And then they also have a new phone coming out that's very kind of harkening back to the original BlackBerries. And I love the look of them. I wish that they kind of leaned more into my space, but they're not really made for social media and things like that, which I need.
Okay, so it is a thing. It's not that I had a dream and I've missed an opportunity.
No, you and I think,
Darn.
yeah, I think if you got your hands on one of those keyboards, you would just be like, nope, this is me now.
I absolutely would. I don't like the, what do they call it, a digital keyboard? I hate it. I can't spell. My fingers are always all over the place. It's just ridiculous. If I could have an actual keyboard, like on a laptop, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, but the QWERTY keyboard was a huge thing. And it was really amazing that they made this, and then they had the technology that they built for security and BlackBerry Messenger and everything else. I mean, I do believe that the States, this was their mandatory for their official cell phones and things like that. Their official devices were always BlackBerry until a certain point in time where things changed, which would probably, they are, but they're doing more the security side of things.
Oh, okay.
But then you go into, let's say, 2007-ish, and you get the first iPhone.
Yes.
And we took it from being a tool to a toy.
Yep.
And shortly thereafter, I do believe in the beginning of 2008, we got the first Android. They didn't
These
adopt.
things.
Yeah.
They're the best, worst things ever.
They are. They didn't adopt or adapt. And unfortunately, this is what happened. I have a lot of friends that used to work for BlackBerry, and they will all tell you the same thing. One, they want their physical keyboard back. And two, BlackBerry didn't move with the times.
So there you go. Always move with the times.
Or at least be cognizant of what's happening.
There's the lesson in that.
Yes. Now we're talking about, we've come up to modern times. Why don't we take a bit of a step back and talk about some other older technologies that have come in that we really haven't, well, we haven't talked about yet.
Such as?
Well, it's kind of in your space, like violin strings or bass strings.
String instruments, that's more or less what I do.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yes, string instruments had its own, or had more than just one, disruption over the centuries. Strings are a big one. For a long time, it was gut strings everybody used. Cat gut, although it was never really made, no, I shouldn't say really, it was never made out of cats. It was mostly sheep, sometimes goats and cows, but it was not cats.
Yes.
So no cats were harmed in the making of string strings. But they were gut for a long time, and then in the 1700s, they started winding the gut strings with thin lines of copper or silver or some other metal to get, a louder sound, more presence, and people were not super happy about that because they thought, well, gut strings are like they've been the standard, and if you start messing with that, you're going to erase all the warmth and depth of tone and all the kind of stuff that people talk about with LPs versus CDs. So that was a huge disruption, and then, as things went on, in the 1800s, wound strings just became the norm. They supplanted the gut strings almost entirely.
It would be like they started with the G string because that was the thinnest string. And that was the one
No,
they started with, isn't it?
Thickest string.
Oh, they started with the thickest.
Yeah, the larger, thicker diameter strings are the ones they started winding.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it got smaller and smaller as they went with the technology that they could do it.
Yes, exactly. It was in 1919 that a company called Tomastic Infield actually created a totally steel E string, which would be the thinnest, highest sounding string on a violin. So they have actual, like, there's no gut in those. It's just a spun length of steel. So that was a huge disruption, and it didn't quite put gut string manufacturers out of business because you still can buy them, and there are groups. Oh yeah, there are groups that will what they call period music groups. They play early Baroque and early classical stuff.
Yes.
They'll all play on gut strings, so you can still buy them. I tried them once.
Yeah.
When a group called Tafel Music, who are an early music ensemble based in Toronto, came to my university, and I was bugging the bass player after the show, and she let me play a couple of notes. I honestly don't see the appeal. They're very temperamental, they're very expensive, and I would much rather go with the stability that you get with steel or hybrid nylon strings.
Well,
but
I remember when you were buying your new bass, the one that we have, or you have currently, and we were in Heinel's, which is the big violin luthier in Toronto, and somebody came in and bought gut strings. Now this had to be in the early 2010s.
Oh yeah,
and they were about $800 for a set of bass strings.
Yeah, it was some guy that played in the Canadian Opera Company, and they were talking because they were ahead of us in line. And well, I think the guy's name was Alan. I can't remember exactly, but anyway, so okay, well, all right, we'll see you next month for your next set of strings. I thought, how much are they paying these people that they can just come in every month and buy $800 worth of strings? That's wild. But you have to. They just don't last. So you pretty much have to be doing that with those gut strings.
Yeah, so that should give you an idea. Whereas you have to should replace your strings maybe once a year, once every 6 months.
I do not
to
have
a year.
to, but you could probably, I would imagine, at least bass strings anyway.
Yeah.
You could get years out of them if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. I normally replace mine every year.
So this should give you an idea of the kind of...
And I don't pay $800 for a set of strings either.
Absolutely not. So, as you see, without these disruptive technologies, we are...
Have you textile people had any disruptions, or have you all been living in the 16th century for the whole time?
Well...
Because that doesn't seem like an industry that would have much of that.
Tons of disruptions. Think about it. Like, when we started with textiles, we started with pelts. Then we moved to when we could make fabrics, and people were walking around. You could see kids walking around with spindles, drop spindles. I'll bring another one on another day, and making yarn as they're just walking along. Then, on top of that, then you get the spinning wheel.
Kids these days walking around with their drop spindles causing problems.
Oh, I know, they always do. So there's been tons of evolution and technology changes in this, but the one that I'm thinking about really that's a good example, and probably a little more interesting, would be when we introduced Jacquard.
Ooh, Daguerre, Jacquard. Who's with the French?
They're brilliant and good inventors.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Cutting edge.
Jacquard made his loom, and these were the ones that can do super intricate things. Say you're doing like a landscape on a piece of fabric. It was all done with punch cards, very similar to how the first prototypes for a lot of computers.
Really? Punch cards?
Yep.
Okay.
That's how they worked. And without Jacquard, we would not have the word sabotage. So through technology, we also get new words. It's always fun. The reason for this is because the peasants, that's awful, but the people who were the tradespeople who did these kind of things, and it was obviously a very specialized and very niche thing to do, were very mad about the Jacquard loom and saw it as a threat. So they would throw their wooden clogs, like think the Dutch wooden clogs, they were called sabots, and they would throw them into the works of the machine to try and break it. Thus, sabotage.
Okay, all right. Checks out. Story
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, of course, one of the biggest disruptors, because I can go on about that, but we'll talk about them another day, I promise. The biggest disruptor right now is artificial intelligence.
Ah, yes. The elephant in the room.
Yes. So, I mean, without getting too deep into opinions, because that is, of course, a topic for another day, I'm definitely wary of this one as much as I am cautiously optimistic. I mean, Skynet, that's all I'm gonna say.
Exactly.
But regardless, it's impossible to ignore this influence, right? It's something that came in, and I mean, I know I pushed back against it for a long time when I was working in a space where, honestly, it was starting to really become overwhelmingly part of this area that I was working in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to see how much it is kind of sneaking into all parts of our lives.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
But it is impossible to ignore the influence. It's on every major industry. It's how we consume and criticize media, not to mention its creative, ethical, and climate-based impacts.
We've been hearing a lot about that lately.
Yeah. So we've gone from, catgut strings, to looms, to rifling footwear at machines, to AI.
To Philip Larkin.
To Philip Larkin.
Seriously.
That is a wide-ranging conversation.
It really is. And what it really comes down to is the fact that technology is changing how we create is not new. Which is also why we are not just sticking with today, we are looking at the historical situations and relating them back to what is happening and how they parallel, I guess, the situations that we are in today when it comes to tech and creativity.
Right. So, there we go.
Yep. So, if you liked this, please make sure that you do like and subscribe. Share it with your friends. This is how we get noticed. And please make sure that you leave a comment. And we want to, leave a comment. We want to interact with you. This is a community, like we've said before.
Yep. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, because we're on there.
Yep. You can usually find us at Room for Creativity Pod, all one word. That's our tag and handle all the way across everything. Also, look for our website at roomforcreativitypod.com. Have a free Substack. We will have all of our references found, and you'll be able to find those out there on our website. So, other than that,
thank you very much for showing up, and we'll see you next week when we dive into the history, I think, of photography.
Part 1.
Looking forward to that.
Oh yeah, this is going to be a really interesting one. I'm so excited about it.
Thanks again, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Yep. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.